Vinetum Britannicum, I don't know if you heard about that. It was written in 1675. It was the first time someone had written a book saying, hey, let's start a cider industry. Rather than spending all our money in Europe, they keep all of the profits. We're buying in wine and sack and sherry and all the time. Why don't we start our own? And I love that. Here's a first edition copy. I treated myself when we published World's Best Cider. Went out and bought a copy. It's amazing. Cider preferred to foreign wines, and he's kind of arguing the case. You know, let's do it. We've got the climate, we've got the fruit, the knowledge. All we've got to do is get organised. I've got a few facts to start with. NACM is our Cider Australia. It's the British Association of Cider Makers. They put together a few facts and figures a few years ago. Apparently the numbers are about the same. I just figured you guys might find some of this interesting. That's about, 3 billion is our market at the moment. 9% of all our alcohol consumed. 1.5 billion pints in the UK every year. Those are imperial pints. None of your middies, pots, schooners, all the rest of the things I can't quite figure out or remember at the bar. 250,000 tonnes of UK grown apples. We grow a hell of a lot of cider fruit in the UK. We've grown it for hundreds of years. You know, it grows particularly well there and it suits the drinks we make. A much smaller proportion of eating fruit, you can see there, but 200,000 tonnes of cider fruit, you know, with a lot of tannin. That tannin goes a fair old way, actually. 17,300 acres, which is tiny. If, you know, I don't know how many of you guys are farmers here or you understand those kind of sizes, but England's a pretty small place. These are our principal cider making areas. You can see the West Country there on the left. People want to know where the best cider is made. I always say it's that right there in Somerset on that little star, but I'm a bit biased because that's where I live. So this is a duty exemption. If you're making less than 7,000 litres, you don't have to pay any tax. And that's been in place, I think, since the 60s. And what it's done is it means that there's loads of small guys all around the West Country who can make it at home on a very small scale, sell a bit, small holding style stuff. And it's just kept the craft alive, the tradition alive. And I love that. Without that, it'd be a very different place. There'd be a lot less kind of skills, you know, traditional skills hanging on. So for me, that's been a really good thing. There was talk about canning it a few years ago. I think the French were complaining it was unfair, which it may be, but you know, the last thing I want to do is get rid of that. I think that was a really good thing. It's one of the few brilliant things we've ever done for cider. One thing I do like about the UK, and it's a bit of a surprise to some people, is that we do have these cider giants. I don't particularly like the cider, personally, but it's just not my style. I'm used to more craft farmhouse style, but the fact these guys are out there, they're advertising, you know, they're spreading the word, that's actually really important. And I think any cider industry, when it gets to a certain stage, will have hopefully that full spectrum of the, you know, the commercial stuff and the craft stuff, and it's reciprocal, I think. You know, the big guys need the small guys to provide, you know, the artisan side, the heritage, you know, the apple growing, the romance. And I think the little guys need the big guys in terms of budget and, you know, market and all of that. So it's always an uneasy relationship, and it's easy to get, you know, into the politics of it all. But I always think to people, you know, just take a step back, and you know, it's not like, you know, you've got to compete with beer, you've got to compete with wine, you've got to compete with all the RTDs, all the rest of it. You know, when you look at it in that context, you know, if you're insider, you're insider. You know, that's the main thing for me. This is Ed. He's a commercial apple grower. These are all cider fruit, and it's just amazing when you see the sheer numbers of that it's grown. You know, one guy on his farm, it's bonkers. We've got these kind of swimming pool type vats. These guys, they all get filled in. You'd be amazed at the quality of the fruit. So we don't hand pick our fruit in the UK. It falls on the floor. We sweep it up. That's one of the reasons it's probably a whole lot cheaper. But yeah, you can see all of these trucks arrive. They're dumping sort of 30, 40 tons at a time, and they get bobbed down, you know, washed into the press, whatever, into the washing room and into the mill and stuff. That gives you some idea. You can see the little black hole. That's where the apples were bobbed down. This was up at Weston's. These great big fermenters. I mean, it's hard to get some idea of the scale. So pretty much all of our traditional cider is still. We've got some bottle fermented stuff, and we have more of a sort of retail style cider coming through these days, which made really well is lovely. So it's traditional in nature, but it's filtered and packaged in a nice bottle, and I think that really helps people explore cider. You know, a lot of people in the UK say, I don't drink cider anymore. Christ, you know, when I was 15. That's the story I hear all the time, and then you give them a good, cleaned up retail style cider that's made traditionally, you know, with proper cider fruit, wild yeast fermentation, but just cleaned up a little bit, and it blows them away. They love it, and it's a far cry from those days of poison where they were, you know, drinking something really cheap and horrible. It's generally the rougher kind of farmhouse stuff that puts people off. So it's quite nice that people are still making that. They're making that well, but then there's this kind of middle ground of cleaned up retail ciders. Scrumping is stealing apples, and I figure if someone's stealing apples, they're not growing them. They probably don't know what they're doing when it comes to fermenting them. So they know all they've got to do is squash it, get the juice, and leave it. And so therefore, it's pretty rough style cider because they don't really know what they're doing with it. But it's quite good in terms of branding cider itself. People like, oh, I'll have a pint of scrumpy. It's a bit of an adventure in a glass. Yeah, thank you. That's all I've got to say about that. So any questions, you know, anything anyone wants to talk about, let's do it.